Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic podcast. It's episode number 663. Today, we have Miriam Schwab as our guest. She is the founder or co-founder of Strattic.
Strattic.
Or Strattic. Sorry, I mispronounced that. Strattic.
That is okay.
And we're going to be discussing Headless WordPress, the myths and the truths. So, Miriam, do you mind just introducing yourself a little bit? And then we'll dive into things a little bit more.
Okay, sure. So hi, thank you for having me on podcast number 663, which is very impressive. I'm Miriam Schwab. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada. I live in Israel now, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Strattic, which is an end-to-end hosting platform that converts WordPress sites to headless and static in one click for ultimate security, scalability, and performance. Prior to founding Strattic, I founded and managed a WordPress development agency called Luminea. Did that for at least a decade. I think something like 13 years. Came up with the idea of Strattic. Was very fortunate to sell Luminea and be able to focus on Strattic.
There's just one thing. Is it me, Stephen? I'm sorry, we might have to redo this.
Okay.
Is it me, Stephen, or your sound, Miriam?
My sound?
Your sound's breaking up a little bit.
Is it?
Yes. It's coming across just a little bit crackly. Not
Crackly.
terrible.
Well, yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm doing a podcast, so yeah. So wait, okay, I have my AirPods in, which usually actually makes it better, but I'll take them out.
Oh yeah, I think that's it. You want to use your mic because that's probably doing the wireless a little bit.
Okay, how's that?
Oh yeah, speak some more, Miriam.
Well, hello. How are you? And how are things going? And how's the weather? Oh, here it's snowy.
Yeah,
better?
That's a lot better. So you because obviously we wanted your great voice to come over the podcast. We didn't want it spoilt, so I thought I would interrupt. So you want to do your countdown again, Stephen? And
yeah, sure. And now I can I'll make sure to pronounce the company name
Strattic properly.
That was embarrassing.
I'm so happy. Actually, I'm so happy about that because it's normally me that destroys either the guests' names or their company names. So I am actually, it's terrible, isn't it, Stephen, that I get joy from your stumble, but I've got to be honest. There we go. Sorry.
All right. From the top. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic podcast. It's episode number 663, and today we have Miriam Schwab with us. She's the co-founder of Strattic, a company that specializes and focuses on static WordPress sites. So we're going to be diving into headless WordPress, static sites, the myths and the truths. Miriam, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Miriam Schwab. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Strattic. We're an end-to-end hosting platform that converts WordPress sites to static and headless architecture in one click for ultimate speed, security, and scalability. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada. Now I live in Israel. And prior to founding Strattic, I founded a WordPress development agency called Luminea. Did that for over a decade, building high-quality websites for organizations, companies, nonprofits, etc. Came up with the idea for Strattic from my experience, and was fortunate to sell Luminea and focus on Strattic.
Cool, thanks. And as always, we have Jonathan Denwood with us. Jonathan, you want to quick introduce yourself to the new listeners and viewers?
Yes, sure. I'm the founder of WP-Tonic, this podcast, plus WP-Tonic. We host, support, help build learning management systems and membership websites for organizations, entrepreneurs, anybody that wants to build a business around e-learning.
Thanks. And my name is Steven Souter, the co-host of the WP-Tonic podcast. So we're going to go on a quick break, and we're going to come back and start diving into static WordPress sites. All right.
Just give me a break. So, since that was like a break, I just have a kid here. One second. Mar, can you go do that outside now because we're recording something? I think they're finished, don't they? Okay, but take the charger also so you have that. Okay. Thank you. And close the door behind me, okay? Okay. Hopefully now
I'm very impressed with the managerial style. A bold leader, I can tell.
My team at home, which is my kids, and my team at work, which is my team at work. Yeah.
I can tell it was very impressive, Miriam, actually. So there we go. Sorry.
All right. Welcome back, folks. You just heard from our major sponsor, Castus. They have some amazing deals going on. To find out more about that and other recommendations from the WP-Tonic, you can go to wptonic.com/recommendations. All right, Miriam, just like diving in here, maybe just give us a little bit of background on Strattic. You talked a little bit about your other agency and then starting Strattic out of some needs, but what were those needs? Why did you start wanting to create Strattic? And what are like the problems that you're trying to solve with Strattic?
So while I was managing the agency, we weren't only building websites, we were also providing like a maintenance service for our clients. Early on in the agency, I learned the hard way that it's not a good idea to build a WordPress site and then hand it off to the client and be like, here's your site, good luck, see you later. Because WordPress sites need management and maintenance, and if you don't maintain them properly, they can get hacked and they can have issues. And then what was happening was our clients weren't having a good user experience. They were getting a great site on day one, but then by day, 365, they weren't thrilled anymore. So we started to offer that service. It was win-win anyways. It's good recurring revenue for an agency. But as time went on and WordPress's market share grew, and also sites became more dynamic, and just different factors that went into the progression of the internet in general, WordPress sites became more and more of a headache for us to manage, even though we were a team of experts. Staying ahead of the latest vulnerabilities, making sure that all our client sites are, patched immediately, so there's no window of opportunity for hackers. And then if something falls through the cracks and it does get hacked, cleaning up malware. And performance also became more and more of an issue. Our clients didn't just want us to build sites for them, they wanted them to be performant because that impacted their rankings, conversion rates, et cetera, et cetera. And then also scaling sites for traffic under different conditions. So sometimes, a client would be like, we're about to run a campaign or launch a new product and we're going to get PR, we're going to get a lot of traffic. And so we try to provision servers, make sure that everything would be okay. And sometimes it was, and sometimes it wasn't. And when it wasn't, that's the worst. Or even just low level DDoS attacks that could take down a WordPress site. And so all of this starts to become more and more of a pain. Plus, WordPress's reputation among developers was becoming weaker and weaker, and wasn't exactly, the tool of choice or the cool tool for developers to be working on. And I started to think maybe by focusing on WordPress, we weren't doing right by our clients anymore. And it was time to look into other options that are out there in order to be making sure that they're aligned with the modern web. So I started exploring what was out there, and I came across this emerging trend known as static site generators. Also, it became known as the Jamstack. That term was coined by the founder of a company called Netlify, and they're one of the leaders in this trend of modern development. Basically, what static site generators do is that they deploy a site that's fully pre-rendered, and it's just a collection of static files, meaning it's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And once you deploy a site in that format, all of the pain points that me and my team and many others in the WordPress community were experiencing are gone. They just become irrelevant because the issues related to security have to do with the database and the processing server and all that stuff. The issues related to performance and scalability also have to do with the server. On WordPress, when you request to see a page, it's ready for you in that moment on the fly, which gives a lot of power, but also is very resource intensive. So if you're not doing that efficiently and well, then the page load can be slow. And we know that optimization in WordPress is a big pain point. And scaling can become also really, really challenging. But once the site is just a collection of static files, serving up each file is really lightweight. It's not resource intensive. So you've basically removed the attack surface of WordPress by having it just like static files, no servers, no databases, nothing. It's super fast because every page is pre-rendered. It doesn't have to be built for you on the fly. And it scales, no problem, effortlessly. You never have to think about it. So I was like, wow, that's super cool. I want that. And I could also see that in developer communities, people were like really getting excited about it. But when I looked into what it meant to build those types of sites, and then on the ongoing maintenance, not the technical maintenance, but content creation types of maintenance that was involved in those types of sites, I came to the conclusion that it's just much more resource intensive. It takes a lot more to build one of those sites. You now have to have a front end team and a back end team. And you end up having to build stuff from scratch that in WordPress land, we just take for granted. User permissions and like things related to SEO, which is thanks to plugins, but still 301 redirects and meta descriptions and all that kind of stuff, Open Graph, anything that we want is there at the click of a button, basically. And in the world of Jamstack, you have to build it from scratch. And then once you've deployed that site and you've built it and you hand it off to the marketing team and the content creators, they're going to experience a ton of friction because like they used to just be able to build a landing page. Now they'll need more developer resources even to do things that they just they could do on their own. So I came to the conclusion, and I was very happy, that WordPress is still the best content management system out there. After comparing what was out there, because also these statically generated sites, they need a content management system. And what's happening in that space is that there's there's too much diversity among the options. You can choose from 10, 20 different CMSs, and each one of them is good. But when you've got so many and like the resources are being divided among them, none of them is like great, like for the content creators. So I came to the conclusion that WordPress is still like the best in class in terms of content management systems. But I was inspired by this movement to think, well, what if we turn WordPress into a static site generator? And then you get the best of both worlds. You use WordPress as usual. You get to use all the plugins. You can use page builders. Your content team doesn't have to learn new tooling. They don't have friction to do their work. They can still use their power tool, which is WordPress. They click a button and it generates a static replica of the site. It looks exactly like the WordPress site. It feels like it, acts like it. The functionality is the same, etc. But there's no underlying processing server. All the pages are pre-rendered. It can be fully served up through a content delivery network, which we do on Strattic for our users. And so it removes a ton of the headache around the ongoing maintenance of WordPress sites. So that's where the idea came from.
That's awesome. So it's really taking like the strong points of WordPress and the strong points of custom building a site that's not WordPress and kind of taking both of those good things and putting them together so you can use WordPress and you don't have to be saddled with a lot of the negative aspects of WordPress.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. And the idea is that you get all of that pretty easily. Like literally our users just have to click a button in the WordPress admin and everyone can click a button. So
yeah. But, great. So getting like, just dissecting that a little bit more, like getting to the security side of things. So you have to be able to log into your WordPress backend somehow, and there's still a database somewhere. How do you separate the two? Like how do you have a front end site that is like decoupled from that backend admin dashboard creating posts? That's
a very good question. So our platform end to end, so that means that we also host the WordPress site. And the way that we do that is in a pretty unique way. Every site is in its own isolated containerized environment. And it is only accessible to people who have permission to access it. You have to go through our Strattic authentication in order to access the site. And then you can make changes to that site. When the site is not in use, it shuts down. So that's another layer of security around it. And then all of the communication from the WordPress site to the static site is one directional. So the WordPress site is this point of truth. You make all your changes there. You click a button. It deploys those changes into the static replica. But that static replica never, ever communicates back with the WordPress site. And that also is for security reasons. In the world of headless WordPress deployments, the way the conventional types of sites work, if you can call it conventional because it's also pretty new, is that the WordPress backend or admin is always alive, always up, and always communicating with the front end. And the front end is requesting information through APIs from the backend. That gives a lot of flexibility, but it means that backend is still a potential point of failure. It can still actually be DDoSed, depending on how you protect it or how good you are at protecting it. And what's a growing threat in the security realm is actually API vulnerabilities and API hacks. So as long as you've got this like thing, this entity that's there, that's like feeding information, it's got potential for issues. So we fully decouple it, which gives like ultimate security. It does create challenges because it means that instead of us being able to depend on the WordPress backend for certain types of functionality, what we've done is we've recreated functionality on the edge. Strattic runs on AWS, Amazon Web Services. So we'll utilize Lambda at edge, Lambda functions for that type of functionality. Whereas, we could have gone the easy route of just kind of looking back to the WordPress site, but we chose not to for the security aspect. I think we made the right choice, but I'm just saying that it was like it didn't make life easier for us because we did have to do that. So that's around the security of the sites on Strattic.
Cool. How do you handle like that interaction stuff? You were talking about like Lambda functions and stuff, but like just like in layman's terms, like I have a form and somebody submits something on the form and it appears in my back end, and that's how I know to reply to somebody. Like what we're talking about decoupling stuff. What happens to my form? Or even like taking that further, what happens to an e-commerce store? Can you even do that on something more dynamic like that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So one of our first goals when we started building the product, the first goal was generate a perfect static replica of a site. That in and of itself is actually not easy. Make sure that you don't crash the original server, make sure they capture everything that you need to capture, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, fine, done, check. Next goal, identify common types of dynamic functionality that don't work on a static site and replicate that on the static site. So the most common examples are forms, search, and then the things like 301 redirects and things like that generally need to access a database, multi-language like WPML sites and Polylang, things like that. So as we started onboarding customers, we learned from them, what are more common needs. If we saw something that kept repeating itself, then, we would learn from that and prioritize that in our product development. Plus, we would combine that with our experience in the agency. After building, I don't even know how many sites over 13 years, you learn a thing or two about how people use WordPress sites. So that knowledge was very helpful to us in terms of also prioritizing. So right away, we knew, like for forms, for example, that we were going to support Contact Form 7 and Gravity Forms. I'm a huge fan of Gravity Forms. We use that at the agency, and it also happens to be that a lot of people use Contact Form 7. So we created an initial support for Contact Form 7 was relatively easy. It's pretty basic, but Contact Form 7, Gravity Forms has a ton of functionality. And so we've rolled out a few versions of our support for it, but now we support almost everything that Gravity Forms does. So if you have like conditional fields, and so you can still build your form on your WordPress site using Gravity Forms as usual. You don't have to change that. You can use conditional fields. You can say, if someone says, I want to click support, send a notification to, like all that kind of stuff. And all our users have to do is click the button, and then we replicate that functionality on the static site. And then also, if someone submits the Gravity Forms form, it feeds it back into the WordPress database through some magic, and then it's also there. Yeah, so that's around. Oh, and now we also support Elementor forms. Why? Because more and more of our users were using Elementor. And then once they're using Elementor, they're just going to use their forms, which makes sense. And so we needed to make sure that we supported that as well. So done. Search. What happens with search is if someone has like the WordPress search, when they click publish, we automatically generate a search index in a tool called Algolia. It's the best search product out there. And we replace the form with a function that calls that index. And so our users get search that not only works, but it's actually better quality than the native WordPress search. And then 301 redirects we implemented support for, and multi-language. And like we have a whole list of stuff on our site that we support. And we're always like got our ears to the ground, listening to what our customers are saying, what's a challenge, things like that, and trying to prioritize around that.
We need to go for our break, Stephen.
Oh yeah, sorry. Just got sucked into the conversation here. We're gonna head and we'll be right back. All right, coming back for our break. If you have the time, head over to the WP-Tonic Mastermind Facebook group and check it out. You can learn a lot by following and engaging in the conversation over there. You can also catch the live streams as well as posts from our YouTube channel. So head over to Facebook and join the WP-Tonic Mastermind Facebook group. All right, John, do you have any questions here? I've been kind of dominating the conversation.
Well, I knew you would have I knew this would be your cup of tea, Stephen. Be that Stephen is obsessed by website performance, so I knew he would be delighted with this conversation. Miriam, I sense you in some ways you're a bit like WP-Tonic, because I see WP-Tonic, what we offer, as a hybrid. And, you know, WordPress is dominated by plugin companies and hosting companies, some very large ones, extremely large ones. And what you're doing isn't classic, you know, plugin, themes, hosting. They are the people that dominate WordPress, aren't they? Theme shops, they've declined a bit because of page builders, but plugins and hosting providers. But you're providing a hybrid, really. That's how I see it. And what WP-Tonic offers to our clients is a hybrid. So you're not fully a SaaS. So you're not Wix and you're not Squarespace, but you also don't fit into the classical plugin or hosting provider. Do you think that's been a bit of a problem? And if and how have you come to any rationality about how you've overcome that, or is it just an ongoing process? It's just part of a challenge that you have to consistently overcome.
That's a very insightful question. I don't hear that outside of Strattic very much, but inside of Strattic, we definitely talk about this and think about this, because the way I describe us is that we're a company that happens to also do hosting, because we're not a classic hosting company. You don't put your site on a server and we're like, okay, now the world can see it. We re-architect your site. So that is not a standard hosting company approach at all. So that's why I say we're a company that happens to also do hosting. And we're not like a SaaS closed garden type of company. And this part of our philosophy, I guess, around it, which is that we don't want to limit users in what they can do. And that's the beauty of WordPress. With WordPress, the opportunities and the possibilities are endless. Yeah, you should probably draw a line somewhere and not turn it into like a full-fledged, I don't know what, Facebook, but you really can take it far. And our users should be able to take it far. And we want to be able to continuously support that and as much as possible, never say no. And if we say no, it's not no. It's like, how about instead of that, just do it this way. But keep doing, you be you. So it's different. And we had to consider from the start whether we called ourselves, whether we used hosting even in our messaging, because we didn't want to be compared as apples to hosting companies. And hosting is like really not like sexy. Nobody's like excited to be like the next hosting company.
Well, it's very profitable if you get it right, though, isn't it?
Very profitable. But also we're a venture-backed company. We went the startup route, and so we also need to be appealing to investors. It's like when you're running a venture-backed company, you essentially have two audiences, and investors don't always like to think of themselves this way, but you also have to, in a way, like sell to them. You have to speak language that is appealing to them. So hosting was like, who wants to, that's not exciting. But we realized that if we don't use the word hosting, people won't understand what we do. And even so, when we say headless and static hosting platform, we very often get the question, so do you replace my current hosting? And the answer is, of course, yes. But I totally get why that's not clear. So so that was challenging around the messaging through trial and error and just like understanding who our user base is at this point in time. We came to the conclusion that we call ourselves a WordPress headless and static hosting for WordPress kind of thing. The most challenging thing around our messaging, though, was coming to the conclusion that we're going to use the terminology headless and static, because we debated what is in marketing 101 kind of thing, you're always taught, don't talk about the features, talk about the benefits. What is it that, the hammer and the nail, the feature is that it gets the nail to the wall, or whatever that metaphor is. And so nobody theoretically wants to know about how you're doing it, or what it is, but what the benefit is that they'll get. So in our case, what's the benefit that they get? Security, stability, speed, peace of mind. Actually, we've learned also, I don't have to think about that anymore. But then we just sound like every other hosting company, because if you go to any other hosting company's website, they're also talking about how they're secure, fast, performant, and scalable. So then, and what do we say? For real? That's not persuasive. So we came to the conclusion that we are going to just be very straightforward about how we do it, because for the audience that this will speak to at this point in time, and I'll explain why I keep saying point in time, that's going to totally tell them what the benefit is. By saying your site will now be running in a headless and static format in one click, then the persona that we're targeting right now is like, oh, that is totally something I want. And I totally understand why that is the most secure, most resilient, most whatever way of running a site. I'll explain the point of time thing. Yeah. Sure.
So am I, as you were saying that, would I be correct that you're kind of aiming it at the kind of WP Engine crowd, that kind of quasar developer, agency, higher-end freelancer, or a technical, somebody in a company that knows that they need quality hosting, might be a little bit more expensive. Somebody that's looking at WP Engine or Kinsta rather than one of the more larger providers that maybe not so specialized around WordPress. I'm struggling to be diplomatic here, Miriam.
I totally hear that. So our target persona and target, let's say, organization or company, I'll start from the basics, which is that they are an organization or company where their website is important to them. Like, it matters to them from a business perspective. It contributes to their marketing efforts, their sales efforts, their bottom line, their brand, and they care about it, and they're already investing in it. So once I've said that, what it means is, if they're already investing in it, it means that they're generally using platforms and tooling that maybe are more premium. And so they will often already be hosting on one of the more premium hosting providers. What we do see a lot is that those types of companies are also often hosting within their own cloud platforms. Like, we've had people come from Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, less Google Cloud because WordPress on Google Cloud is a little bit problematic, but let's say AWS on EC2 instances and things like that. So that's who we're targeting. And then they tend to like overlap with those types of companies. Yeah.
Well, thanks for that.
That makes sense. All right, should we head to bonus content now, Jonathan?
Yes, that'd be great. It's been a fantastic. You're okay to being with us another 10, 15 minutes? Are you okay
Sure.
with me?
What is bonus content?
Content, you got to go to the YouTube channel to check it out.
Okay, I will. Well, I'm happy to hang out. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, that wraps up the show for today, everyone. As you heard us talking about bonus content, to tune in for the bonus content, head over to the YouTube channel and you can watch the full interview. We'll be getting into where WordPress is going, Gutenberg, and how that affects page speed and static page generation. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you all next week. Bye. All right, bonus content. Here we go. So as you've been talking, something that I think has been really interesting is hearing about how you're having to deal with all of these other plugins and like workaround stuff, because you're doing something that's really complicated, but there's a lot of benefits from doing it. WordPress is like in a moving and evolving ecosystem, especially in the last couple of years with Gutenberg stuff. Is that movement and that evolving ecosystem of WordPress? Because it feels like there's more sophistication that's coming into WordPress, right? It's not just, people in their basement making plugins. We have these huge dev shops that have this higher level of sophistication, like Elementor and stuff, or WordPress itself doing Gutenberg. Does that make the need for static page generation greater, and does it make it more complicated for that to happen, or does that make your guys' life easier and simpler because there's just a little bit more sophistication that you can plug into and see what's going on in WordPress?
Well, first of all, like supporting WordPress in general means that it's a constantly moving target, right? But that's the beauty of WordPress. So, we're in this industry, we're in this ecosystem. That's just part of what we have to deal with. So that's fine. I'll just give you an example of that. So WordPress 5.9 was just rolled out, right? And it has a new theme. We have a QA automation team, and we had to do a whole slew of new tests around publishing that theme, because when people sign into Strattic, they get a fresh install of WordPress. It's a vanilla, and gets the latest version of WordPress, which now has this new theme. So we had to make sure that when we generate a static version of the site, like for that initial user, it's fine. And so we had to do QA testing around that. So it's just that's just par for the course. With regards to Gutenberg and things like that, it's not necessarily more or less complicated for us, but what does help in general, I think, is that there seems to be some kind of consolidation around certain solutions, tools, etc. So, we were moving from a world where there's, let's say, 50 form plugins to a world where there's maybe still 50 form plugins, but there's clear consolidation around, let's say, the top 3 to 5. I think it's part of the growing sophistication of the WordPress industry, where the users are looking for higher quality solutions, and so they tend to congregate around the ones that do the best job, and not necessarily the ones that are cheapest or simplest. It's not necessarily that. So from that perspective, there's 57,000 plugins in the plugin repository. That's not we are not going to cover that. Yeah. We don't have to, because things are moving in one direction. A lot of people in the ecosystem talk about it as a bad thing, like, oh no, everyone's consolidating around particular companies or particular plugins. And I actually tend to kind of agree with that. One of the great things about WordPress was the diversity of solutions and the opportunity for everyone to have an impact with their product. But on the other hand, it does make, I think, everyone's lives easier, not just ours, but developers and builders, when they can rely on very strong solutions. So yeah, it's not more, it's not less. I think it's good for the whole ecosystem to be moving in a more sophisticated direction. It's a good sign. It means it's more future proof. So in general, it's good.
Do you have any advice or thoughts to share with people that might be thinking about building or creating a plugin, since you're kind of on the end of dealing with plugins that people build and create? How do I make sure that the plugin that I build and I create is not going to cause problems? Because ultimately, if it causes problems for you, it causes problems for me in support tickets too, right? The more people can align, the better things work.
Yeah. What we have wanted to do from the beginning, but we're a relatively small team, so we don't have enough clout to do it. But it's education of WordPress site owners, but also education for developers. So we actually have a guide on our site. I think it's called the Guide to Headless Static WordPress Development or something like that. And the idea behind that is to make it clear what it means to be running something that might also run on a static environment, and how you can make sure that it's compatible. Because the vast majority of functionality can totally be compatible on a static site. It's just planning for it, being aware of it. And so instead of, let's say, using some Ajax something for that, just don't, and do it a different way, and then you're good to go. And then it saves work down the line. We just did work with a really nice team from a plugin called Newsletter Glue. I don't know if you know them. They were ranked. There was some contest recently about top WordPress plugins, whatever. I think they won, or they were in the top 3. And I think they're relatively new, so good for them. But we had some customers come to Strattic who were using their plugin. It didn't work out of the box, and they were very interested in making sure that their plugin could work on Strattic and other static environments. And so they together with our guidance and our on our end, their plugins now compatible. So I would say, like, just be aware of what it means, because going forward, more and more sites will be running in this architecture, and it really isn't a big deal to be static compatible from the beginning. It demands a little bit more work later on if you haven't done it from the start.
Do you feel like this is really the direction that all hosting providers are going to go? Like,
I don't.
static pages here, it's just more people are gonna start adopting it from here on out.
It's hard to say, because after building Strattic to where it is today, and we're only just getting started, I'm like, good luck to anyone else who wants to build this. Yeah. Okay.
Good luck to you.
Seriously. I mean, wow.
I was bonkers at the beginning, but I've accepted it. I've accepted that I was bonkers on day one. Right.
Yeah, it's just really, like, I would almost say to people, like, just don't. Not because I don't want the competition, just like, don't go into that pain. But I think that, like, there's going to be more and more movement towards this more modern approach to web development and applying it to WordPress, which I think is great, because while my conclusion about Jamstack is it's not as good as WordPress, it still has a lot of benefits, and it's got a strong and growing community. And if we want WordPress to continue to be strong going to the future, and right now WordPress has the lion's share of the internet, nothing comes close. But, like, we should never sit back and be like, we're good, because as we know, that's not how things work. If something else comes along that's great, it will take over. And in order for WordPress to continue to be great and to continue to be relevant for now and for the future, it is important to, like, take a look at what's going on around us and see what it is that we can adopt and implement within our own community. So I think we're going to see a lot of, like, and we've seen already, there's been some really interesting approaches to deploying WordPress in a more modern way. Frontity, for example, was a company where you could build, like, your theme using React, but it was, like, tightly tied to WordPress. That was very cool. They were first invested in by Automatic, and then Automatic acquired them, like, and they're now part of the team. But that was a cool approach. And
well, they've gone then, haven't they?
Yeah. But it's
exhumed by the Borg.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Miriam. Those type of comments get me into trouble. I apologise. I just got a question. I see the kind of WordPress as kind of titanic plates, kind of moving and colliding. So I see some of the major hosting providers, buying up plugins quite consistently. I don't personally see a lot of strategy behind some of these purchases myself. The only company that showed, and I'm not surprised, because I think the founder is one of the most sharpest cookies that I've spoken to, and that's WP Engine when they bought Studio Press. Because I could understand the logic, because buying into that community really kind of merged with what WP Engine was trying to provide. Really had echoes of Media Temple, really. But then I see some of the large Asian coding shops. Like a really great example is Fluent Forms, which out of nowhere, in a very competitive market, Forms really got enormous traction very quickly, didn't they? So I see a conflict between those that want, for understandable reasons, for things to centralize around a certain group of plugins, but then you have players like Fluent that just enter the market and in a quite sophisticated way get a sizable part of the market. And am I waffling, or would you agree that the situation seems very confused at the present moment?
I'm going to use a metaphor that I'm not sure is right, and it might make people upset. But when people talk about Americans, okay, by the way, I'm originally Canadian, right? I mentioned that. When people talk about Americans, they're like, oh, Americans. But if you ever go to the United States of America, there's 51 states, I think. And like Americans across America are very different, right? There's Americans like the West, the South, East. It's just different cultures, different backgrounds, different everything, different diverse backgrounds, etc. So WordPress is so huge that's really hard to say what it is. I don't think that it's possible to say that it is one thing. I know for myself that I kind of live in a WordPress bubble where I hang out with like the who's who of WordPress, except for that the long tail of WordPress often doesn't even know that they're using WordPress, doesn't know what it is, doesn't know about who the founder or co-founder of WordPress is. You know what I mean? Like there are so many different types of users. They all deserve and need to be addressed in terms of their needs. So, you know, there's the WP engines of the world, and they have like their particular like market position, and the acquisitions that they make, I guess, make sense for them. You know, looking from the outside, I'm not talking about specifically about them. Sometimes I see companies making acquisitions, and I'm like, why? But okay, sure, like if that works for them. So and there should always be room for innovation. So Fluent comes along and they do something so well that even though forms have been around for forever and everyone's been doing fine, they're like, no, you haven't exactly, like, I'm not saying about them, but like innovation is like, you haven't been doing fine actually, because there's room for big improvements around this, and we're going to bring it to you. And people are like, whoa, that's amazing. I'm going to use your thing. That's great. That's just better for all the users. So I think, you know, WordPress has been around for 18 years. It's really hard to say in some ways what the future holds in terms of the tooling and the approaches. You can see trends, but like I said, there's so many different types of users.
Yeah, I want to just finish off and put this vision to you, because I've been thinking about it quite a bit. I kind of see kind of micro solutions. I think that some of the major hosting providers that have the big bucks, they can see problems on the horizon, because in some ways hosting, in some ways it's been a kind of accommodized, it's the lowest price. But, you know, obviously the problem with that, you soon learn that you get what you pay for. But it does have that, you know, element that, especially with the cloud hosting element to it. So then a lot of them have been, they can see some a storm coming, so they buy
user bases. They can gather a ton of data, right, from all of their users. They can see trends. They can identify what plugins they're all using, and they can say, oh, there's an uptick in the use of this plugin or that plugin. They definitely have a vision or a view that a lot of us don't have, for sure.
Yeah. So then to make their offering more different, they buy plugins, you know, so they can offer whatever their business plan is. They can, so it makes them a more individual offering. Where I see the future is providing WordPress and the ability to move, but offering additional services for particular groups, industries, scenarios, that to kind of micro hosting providers, really, that are zeroed into Pacific, without the restraints that you get with multi-site, which has its place but also has some problems with it. Do you think I'm on the right track there, or do you think I've lost the plot, Miriam?
Well, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. In every business industry, the general guidance is pick a vertical, right? Be specific, specialize, and address a particular market. I think that and I don't know enough like verticals or industries to say for sure, but I don't think there's enough differentiation between how like the industry A and industry B needs to use their websites that makes sense to have specific hosting for them. And then the question is, what value does it bring? And I'll just speak anecdotally from our own experience. So being, like I said, a venture-backed company, a lot of the advice that you get because of how other tech companies have grown is pick a vertical. Like, you can't be the hosting company for everyone. It doesn't make sense. So pick a vertical, or pick a particular cohort of users or an industry that you're going to target. We tried that actually, and it just turned out that so many people want to use Strattic. Like, what are we going to do? We're going to say no to the amazing nonprofits that come to our door. So our language in the end, in a way, what we're targeting is a particular type of person, which I mentioned earlier, which is I didn't get into it, but it's a technically oriented person within an organization who's tasked with keeping the website alive and well. And it's like their headache. But that person can exist in a lot of different companies, or organizations. One of our customers is the United Nations. And, obviously the United Nations is huge. So it's not all the United Nations, but it's under the purview of one particular person within the United Nations who came across Strattic. He's like, all of our humanitarian websites that we're managing have to go on Strattic for reliability, so that there will never be a situation where someone who needs access to this information won't be able to get it. Did I think that that's where it was going to go? No, but it did. So, that's just anecdotally. It is possible.
I would have thought also a main plank is the security element, because they seem, especially in the more professional medium to larger company, there seems to still be a propagandist. Might have all effective propaganda has to have a small bit of truth about it, because otherwise, that's my opinion, all propaganda has to have a small seed of truth about it.
But I don't think so.
For it to be effective, really. So there's a lot of propaganda that still in this corporate, that WordPress is not secure. It's a problem. You don't want to touch it. You want to look at something like Expression Engine, or you want to look at Drupal. And I personally think it's a load of cobblers, but it's out there. Would you agree with that? That is still out there, and I would imagine your product really, in some ways, benefits from that. In some ways,
I wouldn't call it propaganda, because if you follow WordPress news, or even just WordFence's own blog, you will see every second day that there's another vulnerability.
Yeah, I have a problem with WordFence. If you listen to some of the Friday shows, I have bless their little hearts, have no problem with the company. I have a problem with their decision how they promote their business, Meryl.
Well, I think they're impressive, and they're one of the companies that is most is strongest about keeping an eye on things, and then in the end protecting users, because they identify the vulnerabilities and they responsibly disclose them, and they then make sure that their user base is protected, and we all know about these vulnerabilities thanks to them. So I actually think they do great work, but they're not the only ones that are disclosing vulnerabilities. Recently, it was Jetpack that came across the vulnerability in the ActivePress, right? So it's anyone who's keeping their eye on the ball. And the fact of the matter is that every second day, there's another vulnerability that's announced. And because of WordPress's giant market share, it tends to not be something that just impacts 5 or 10 sites. It's hundreds of thousands of sites. So, we can dress it up and call it what we want, but the fact of the matter is that a lot of WordPress sites are dealing with vulnerabilities connected to the way that WordPress works. So yes, security is definitely an issue. And yeah, we can make excuses and say, but WordPress in its native form, just like WordPress installation itself is secure, which I agree with. It generally is, although also even WordPress, the software had a very serious vulnerability recently. And then, by the way, take into consideration the stack that it's running on, which also is something that needs to be paid attention to. Generally, the hosting companies do, but I'm just saying it's more stuff. So the reputation isn't just based on a seed of truth. It's the daily or every second daily truth. For us, yeah, security can be a major benefit for some of our customers. A lot of them come for performance. A lot of them come for security, whether they've been hacked. We have one customer who came to us whose site was ransomware and they had to pay them off. Like with Bitcoin, it was like a whole disaster. And they were like, we do not want to ever do that again. We have customers who come to us for their own, like, I don't know what exactly I would call it, but like how they look to their customers. So if it's a security oriented company and they're selling their product, then the people they're selling to do due diligence on them. And they say, okay, what are you running on? What's your stack? What's your security profile? Blah, blah, blah. What's your site built on WordPress? Oh, we don't feel comfortable with that. That looks problematic. But once they're on Strattic, then even if their original WordPress site has a vulnerability, it has no impact on the static site. And so then they can check that box. And we've seen that with many enterprise customers that come to Strattic. They come for the way it looks, which is fine. That's totally legitimate. So yeah, security is definitely a selling point for Strattic as well. It's actually why I created Strattic, just by the way. It was the security pain point that spoke to me the most.
Well, you strike me as a very rational person. So, Stephen, I think we've taken Meryl's managed to defeat the challenges of her weather conditions, and we've had a great conversation. I think it's time to wrap it up, Stephen.
Yeah. Thanks, Miriam, so much for coming on the podcast. It was great hearing about Strattic and how you guys are addressing security concerns and how decoupling really just erases a lot of those issues, whether it's speed, performance, scalability, or security. Like like you're saying, one button click and you get all those amazing things. So thanks for coming on. How can people find out a little bit more about you and Strattic?
Well, you can go to our site, strattic.com. It has two T's. You can find me on Twitter at Miriam Schwab. You can email me, miriam@strattic.com, whatever you want. That's where we are.
And Jonathan, how can people find out more about you?
Oh, just go to the WP-Tonic website. If you're into e-learning and you want to use the power of WordPress without a lot of the hassles, we're the people to help you with that.
Perfect. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you all next week. Bye.
See you later.